So hi everybody and welcome back to Unreal Engine 5 full game tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 91, and in this video I want to talk shortly about spaghetti code. What I mean with that is when you are looking blueprints and the blueprints start to look like the code is so big and let's say not really readable, then they talk about spaghetti code. And you can see in my horror engine character, which we programmed so far, yes, my program starts to get big. And the question is now how we can avoid this. Normally, when you program, there are very easy ways to avoid this, which are styles. And I want to talk shortly about this, not in depth, because we are here on creating a game and not explaining the code, but you have to know you can avoid this very easy when you use, for example, collapse nodes. What I mean with that is that when you select, let's say, you can see this code here, which I included here at my begin. That was our step counter for the warm scream sound. I made this several videos ago. And this whole code, you can see, has a nice box here, and this is a very nice candidate to make it simple. The easiest way is you select all this one, and then you select a node, not select a node, you go over a node and then right click, and then you can collapse. You have here this collapse options, and there are actually 3 options. Collapse node, collapse function, collapse macro. You have to read them in the documentation, the differences, but I say it very shortly. Collapse node is just for decoration. This is what you want when you want just collapse for fast all things here, just for decoration without reuse. Collapse function is with reuse, which means it is better for performance. This collapse node has, for example, if you can't call it again on other places, you have just to copy the node which you created, but it creates a whole new graph. What I mean with that, let me show you this fast before I talk too much. So let's make all the things. So let's copy first. Instead of when you start, don't collapse it immediately. Copy first this one here. Let's go down, paste, and now test all the collapse first and set up it properly, and then after you are finished, it works fine, then you can perhaps delete this, or even then perhaps put it in another place if something goes wrong. So let's get into this. So I want to replace this one here. And like I said, if you click here, there is not the option. You have to click on one of these nodes. But first of all, you have select all. Click one of these nodes. Then you have here this 3 collapse options. The collapse node, let's make it. And you can see it becomes one node. And you rename it. And now the nice thing is, let's use this one here. You can use this one here instead of the thing. The problem is, so you have to go in and set this up properly. But I go not and make this one. Takes too much time. All right, that was one thing. And now you can see after I set this up, I have already made this here. So after you set this up, you can just connect this one here, disconnect this perhaps here. Just connect this one here and here and here. And after this one, it starts to look much easier. You can see all the code here on top is now replaced by this one here. So you can see, and this one here is just for, let's say for development purposes, just for decorative purposes, which means I just collapse the node and nothing more. What I mean with that is I can't call this one. So you can see the step counter here, it's here. Well, and if I try to drag and drop another one here, it's not working because they just collapsed here the node here for you, so you can work a little bit better. And the problem with most starter is they are not using this one. So you can see I'm not using here it too. But here I used it, and I will tell you in a short why and why you should use it and normally. So let's go on. The thing is now, if you want, let's say you are interested in using this code another play, and like I said, you can just copy the whole node here. Let's Control C, Control V, and I have it. But this node here is actually a copy of this one, which means the whole thing what you have here in it, this one here, is just copied now here, which means when you watch here on your graph, now I have 2. And this is cost performance. That's why they are using this only for decorative purposes. Decorative purposes means you are not reusing the code. You want just collapse here this code instead of having here a big graph. The same thing goes here. Let's say I don't use this graph here is finished, and let's say I don't use this code anywhere else, then I would use just this collapse node, for example, and then I can work very handy with it. The question is why you want to do this. The point is it looks very simple and you can concentrate either on this part or just on this part separately. Makes a lot of the life of a programmer much easier. So let me talk fast about the other nodes too. And the other node is, again, I select this one here. Let's copy this one. All time you have before you use the original code, make a copy of the whole things and test it. Like I said, I want to replace this one here. I copied this one here, and now I want to test the other one. So right click again of a node. There is the function and the macro. So what is the difference of a function? I hope you know what a function is by now. Let's click it and it says, oh, it's not able to make a function, and that is already the restriction. A function is normally very powerful, very good for performance, but a function can't have a delay. For example, a delay here means something like where the program has to wait, because a function is most time made so it has to respond fast. So delay is not responding fast, so it will not work with delay. But I think there are other workarounds with that. But just keep in mind that delay works not, and that's why you are not using function. But in general, functions are very powerful when you are not using delays. Let's say I want just use this one in a function without the delay. You can see now I select only this part, right click, let's make here a function, and check, we have a function. We know already what a function is, I hope by now, but let me explain it one more time. The point of a function is you can recall it, right? This node which I created, I can't recall it. I can copy it, but it creates me here a whole another graph, which is not good for performance. But this one here, on the other hand, you can see the function here is created here now. It makes the same effect. It collapses all the nodes, right? That's what we want, because we want not have here a whole lot of nodes around flying. We want to have a short little node. And the nice thing is I can recall it. You can see. And when I recall this here, the nice thing is it is not recreating here the graph all time. We have only one time created this one, and it's all time reused. And this is good for performance. So with other words, if you want performance, you want not use something like this. I mean, if you are reusing the code, but if you are not reusing the code, for example, in my case here, I use this code only one time for development purposes to make it more visible. Just use a decoration code. And the nice thing about the decoration code, this one works even with delay. So the function is not working with a delay, but this one here works with a delay, because this one is this decoration code, this collapse node is just collapsing this node and nothing more. That's nice. That's very powerful. And that is one way to avoid a lot of this spaghetti code, what is called. Then let me show you here fast, but you can see functions are a little bit more powerful for performance. So if it's possible, I would rather make a function because, like I said, if you are reusing a function, then, if you are reusing a code, make a function, because you don't have to copy the code. If you are not reusing the function, you can make this one, because it's just collapsing the code, similar to a function. But function has even one more powerful thing in it. So they have a disadvantage about this delay. Yes, that is a big disadvantage, but they have a very big advantage as well. They can be called in other places, for example, in other blueprints. And they have even one more advantage, which is you can call them, and you can call them in other places, and I think override them. You can see these functions here. There is something like the override, which means you can use this function, call it, and change its behavior. That's also very nice for example, child blueprints and something like that. You say the child blueprint should have another behavior, or let's say an extended behavior. Then you say, okay, I call this function here and then I override it, which means I extend it, for example, its behavior. So you can see functions are very powerful on the one hand, and sometimes disadvantage because this delay on the other hand. But yeah, and we have even one more thing here, which I want to show you, which is also very nice and handy. Let's go here. Let's copy like all time. We copy this one all time. Your original code you should not manipulate because sometimes can go wrong. So it's you have to test it first time. And yeah, again, you select all your code what you want to replace. This time I want to use the macro. And again, the same thing like before, a macro is just collapsing the whole code. This time it looks like this. Also very nice, but of course you have to go in and then connect here the inputs, but I go not too much into this one here now. But you can see it's very easy. You can select this one. You have here just the input, output, and read this in the documentation. It's really not difficult. And then you have this macro, right? Compile, save. We go back to our event graph. And where is that? Up here. So, and here is my macro, which I just see. And you will see in many projects they use macros as well. So the point here in macro is, let's see, we click on the macro, it's called new macro. Let's go to the macro section. Here's the new macro, for example, 1. Let's see if I can call this one, and you can see the macro is callable. But the nice thing about this macro is what you have to know, the macro here will be replaced the code, which means, let's say I'm using the macro, I don't know, here. The macro will replace the code exactly what it is in this one at this point, which means, let me go here back. So let's see this one again. So the macro code is this one, right? You can see the whole code here, and here let's say I use it exactly here. Then the whole code what you saw before will be placed here from the compiler, which means if you are calling the macro in other places, it's very handy because it's not copying here another thing, but that's not true. Actually, it is replacing the code. So let's say I use it here. It's more or less also a copy. You can see it. So let's say I use it here. This code what's in the macro will be placed here at compile time, right? So careful about macros. They are also very handy, and the nice thing is you can use delays here. They have again the downside that they are I think they are also not overwritable like functions and so on. But important is that you understand. Read this a little bit more in detail, but in general you have to understand the code will be just replaced, and it's again a copying like a code. I would say the best solution would be actually if you can make a function, because the function is not replaced, it will just recalled. The bad thing about function is, like I said, you can't use delays. And alternative, you can use then macros. Read what the difference about macros and this two are. Macros are a little bit more handy than this decorative part. But with that said, you can make the code what you have here and me here much easier. The point is, many on online and I mean on YouTube and so many people are just showing you the code. I mean, they are not really programming the code, they want just demonstrating your code, so they are just connecting fast the code. You can see if you are making this one, there are some tools, for example, they are straightening the line and so on, which makes it beautiful. I try to make it a little bit beautiful, but the question is now, hey, I explain you all these nice things here which can improve our code. Why I'm not doing this one here on my code? Actually, I will do it, but the problem is on my code, the code what we see here is not finished. and then I will not do it, because I will do it only when I'm absolute finished, because here I would normally do it. Here I am finished, I can use this one, and now I have this one, it's more properly. But here I have a problem. This is not finished, but on my side I have another reason why I'm not doing it. Because there's macros and functions, perhaps not, but macros and decorations and so on. The problem with them is they have an overhead, and blueprints are anyway slower than C++. That's why this solution, just to keep the code here, when you call it, it's a little bit cheaper, but actually you can forget it, but it's cheaper than using a collapse node, which has again a little bit overhead, and that's the reason why I personally like this style more. But in general, when you are developing, I would try to develop this way. Just collapse all after you are finished, and that's very important, after you are really finished, because in my case I'm not finished. You can see we have not finished here the connectivities, the real calls, so and the restraints, and that's why I keep this here still up. But after you are finished, just collapse the node, collapse node, and then you have to comment them properly. And this whole thing, what you see here, looks later just this, like this little nodes here, very easy to understand and very straightforward. And that's the thing what you have to understand. And one more thing what I want to show you what I mean, it costs performance, which is also what many programmers, yeah, it's my own opinion what I show you right now. So let's say I have here, yeah, let's call it here a print string, right? Let me show you something interesting. So let's say, just for test purposes, I need this print string for fun 5 times. Okay, what I can do is then I can copy this one, and then I can paste and paste and paste and paste. So I have it 5 times here, right? So, and if you ask now a programmer who sees that I do this way, he would say you are a very, very bad programmer, because many starters would do this, right? And then, but if you ask a programmer why you are doing this, this is stupid. Well, then I ask the programmer, okay, what I should do. The programmer would say, hey, there is a loop. Just use a for loop or something like that. Here's a for loop. Just write a loop. And then say you want it 5 times, right? Something like that. And then you call it 1 time. This will be called, and then you have something like that. You can see the programmer would rather make something like this. The same goes with functions, right? If you ask a programmer when he sees something like that, hey, this is stupid. Why you don't use a function or something like that, a function or a decorative collapse and so on? The point is, he's right. But when you ask now a professional, let's say anyone who is really goes for performance, not for development purposes, this one is probably the right way to collapse and use function. But for performance purposes, you will not believe it, but actually this code is better than this code here. And the reason for that is this one has only one more call than this one. This one has straight up the calls which you need. This one has performance loss. And this goes also with functions. If you are creating for everything functions, the functions will have all time a little bit overhead. Instead of calling it directly here the code, right? For example, you call it here B, instead of calling here now again a function, I just use the code, is from performance perspective better. But again, for development purposes, it's bad. For development purposes, this one is better. It's faster. And yeah, that's why you should consider this one. And one good solution, like I said, this macro is actually working like this. You can use here a macro, because macro, like I said, this macro is just replacing this code later on compile time with that what it is. But yeah, the macro has also an overhead a little bit, and this costs all time performance. It's a little bit, but when you do this whole in your whole code base, it's add up, right? And you will see some programmers will not use this. They will just, you will see in some programmers are using here the code directly, and then you have here big codes instead of having something like this one. So with other words, you see this kind of stuff here. You can make this whole stuff in little, like this red, you can see this red, the red events here. You can have later normally this little things here instead of all this one if you would collapse them all. And that would be very fast for the programmer to develop the code, much easier, because it's now you can concentrate on this block and this block. But I think you understand it. You have to read this a little bit more in detail. The point is, for development purposes, use that what the old people say, just collapse the nodes here and make your life easier. That's much better. It looks for reading the code much better. The only performance a little bit, and this is most time it's most time when you are going for blueprint, you don't care anyway too much about performance, because if you really care about performance, you would go for C++. That's the reality. But yeah, you still have the option here also to gain performance if you make this one. All right, I think you should figure this out on your own, but I wanted to only clarify this a little bit because they are talking much about spaghetti code. And yeah, here are the 3 ways which you can avoid this. Use this 3 collapse ways, but careful, read them on the documentation a little bit more in detail, how to use them, what are the benefits, and when to use them, and all this kind of stuff. And with that said, I finished this video here. See you in the next video where we continue with our game, and probably I will collapse some codes as well during the game like this one to make it easier, but only after I'm finished. Here I'm not finished. And with that said, see you in the next video. Good luck, bye, and like all time, never give up and have fun.